read from the book of Jasher about Nimrod and the Tower of Babel. Please remember to use your own discernment when listening about whether or not you think it should be considered canon. I'll use the book version Enoch, Jubilees, and Jasher, banned from the Bible by Joseph Lumpkin, and I'll show another translation so you can see how they relate to each other. Chapter 7, verse 24. The garments of skin which God made for Adam and his wife when they went out of the garden were given to Cush. For after the death of Adam and his wife, the garments were given to Enoch, the son of Jared, and when Enoch was taken up to God, he gave them to Methuselah his son. At the death of Methuselah, Noah took them and brought them to the ark, and they were with him until he went out of the ark. And in their going out, Ham stole those garments from Noah his father. He took them and hid them from his brothers. When Ham had his firstborn Cush, he gave him the garments in secret, and they were with Cush many days. Cush also concealed them from his sons and brothers. And when Cush had begotten Nimrod, he gave him those garments through his love for him. And Nimrod grew up, and when he was 20 years old, he put on those garments. Nimrod became strong when he put on the garments. And God gave him might and strength, and he was a mighty hunter in the earth. He was a mighty hunter in the field, and he hunted the animals, and he built altars, and he offered on them the animals before the Lord. Nimrod strengthened himself, and he rose up from among his brothers, and he fought the battles of his brothers against all their enemies round about. The Lord delivered all the enemies of his brothers in his hands, and God prospered him from time to time in his battles, and he reigned on earth. Therefore it became current in those days, when a man ushered forth those that he had trained up for battle, he would say to them, like God did to Nimrod, who was the mighty hunter in the earth, and who succeeded in the battles that prevailed against his brothers, that he delivered them from the hands of their enemies, so may God strengthen us and deliver us this day. And when Nimrod was 40 years old, there was a war between his brothers and the children of Japheth, so that they were in the power of their enemies. Nimrod went forth at that time, and he assembled all the sons of Cush and their families, about 460 men. He hired also from some of his friends and acquaintances about 80 men, and he gave them their hire. He went with them to battle, and when he was on the road, Nimrod strengthened the hearts of the people that went with him. And he said to them, Do not fear, neither be alarmed, for all our enemies will be delivered into our hands, and you may do with them as you please. All the men that went were about 500, and they fought against their enemies. They destroyed them and subdued them. And Nimrod placed standing officers over them in their respective places. He took some of their children as security, and they all were servants to Nimrod and to his brothers, and Nimrod and all the people that were with him turned homeward. When Nimrod had joyfully returned from the battle, after having conquered his enemies, all his brothers, together with those who knew him before, assembled to make him king over them, and they placed the regal crown on his head. He set over his subjects and people and princes, judges and rulers, as is the custom among kings. He placed Terah, the son of Nahor, the prince of his host, and he dignified him and elevated him above all his princes. And while he was reigning according to his heart's desire, after having conquered all his enemies around, he advised with his counselors to build a city for his palace, and they did so. They found a large valley opposite to the east, and they built him a large and extensive city. And Nimrod called the name of the city that he built Shinar, for the Lord had vehemently shaken his enemies and destroyed them. Nimrod lived in Shinar, and he reigned securely, and he fought with his enemies, and he subdued them. He prospered in all his battles, and his kingdom became very great. All nations and tongues heard of his fame, and they gathered themselves to him. And they bowed down to the earth, and they brought him offerings, and he became their lord and king, and they all lived with him in the city at Shinar. Nimrod reigned in the earth over all the sons of Noah, and they were all under his power and counsel. And all the earth was of one tongue and the words of union, but Nimrod did not go in the ways of the Lord. He was more wicked than all the men that were before him from the days of the flood until those days. He made gods of wood and stone. He bowed down to them. He rebelled against the Lord, and taught all his subjects and the people of the earth his wicked ways. Mardon his son was more wicked than his father. And every one that heard the acts of Mardon the son of Nimrod would say concerning him, From the wicked goes forth wickedness. Therefore it became a proverb in the whole earth, saying, From the wicked goes forth wickedness, and it was current in the words of men from that time to this. Terah the son of Nahor, prince of Nimrod's host was in those days very great in the sight of the king and his subjects, and the king and princes loved him, and they elevated him very high. And Terah took a wife, and her name was Amthello, the daughter of Cornebo. The wife of Terah conceived and gave birth to a son in those days. Terah was 70 years old when he had him, and Terah called the name of his son Abram, because the king had raised him in those days and dignified him above all his princes that were with him. Chapter 8. It was in that night that Abram was born, and all the servants of Terah and all the wise men of Nimrod and his conjurers came and ate and drank in the house of Terah, and they rejoiced with him on that night. When all the wise men and conjurers went out from the house of Terah, they lifted up their eyes toward heaven that night to look at the stars they saw. And behold, one very large star came from the east and ran in the heavens. He swallowed up the 4 stars from the 4 sides of the heavens. And all the wise men of the king and his conjurers were astonished at the sight. And the sages understood this matter, and they knew its import. They said to each other, "This only betokens the child that has been born to Terah this night, who will grow up and be prolific and reproduce and possess all the earth. He and his children forever, and his descendants will kill great kings and inherit their lands." The wise men and conjurers went home that night, and in the morning all these wise men and conjurers rose up early and assembled in an appointed house. And they spoke and said to each other, "Behold, the sight we saw last night is hidden from the king. It has not been made known to him. And should this thing get known to the king in the latter days, he will say to us, 'Why have you concealed this matter from me?' And then we shall all suffer death. Therefore now let us go and tell the king the sight which we saw and the interpretation thereof, and we shall remain clear." And they did so. They all went to the king and bowed down to him to the ground, and they said, "May the king live, may the king live. We heard that a son was born to Terah, the son of Nahor, the prince of your host, and we last night came to his house, and we ate and drank and rejoiced with him that night. And when your servants went out from the house of Terah to go to our respective homes to abide there for the night, we lifted up our eyes to heaven. We saw a great star coming from the east, and the same star ran with great speed and swallowed up 4 great stars from the 4 sides of the heavens. And your servants were astonished at the sight which we saw, and were greatly terrified. We made our judgment on the sight, and knew by our wisdom the proper interpretation thereof, that this thing applies to the child that is born to Terah, who will grow up and reproduce greatly and become powerful and kill all the kings of the earth and inherit all the lands, he and his offspring forever. Now, our Lord and King, behold, we have truly acquainted you with what we have seen concerning this child. If it seems good to the king to give his father value for this child, we will kill him before he shall grow up and increase in the land, and his evil increase against us, that we and our children perish through his evil. And the king heard their words, and they seemed good in his sight. And he sent and called for Terah, and Terah came before the king. And the king said to Terah, "I have been told that a son was last night born to you, and after this manner was observed in the heavens at his birth. And now therefore give me the child, that we may kill him before his evil springs up against us, and I will give you for his value your house full of silver and gold." Terah answered the king and said to him, "My lord and king, I have heard your words, and your servant shall do all that his king desires. But my lord and king, I will tell you what happened to me last night, that I may see what advice the king will give his servant, and then I will answer the king on what he has just spoken." The king said, "Speak." And Terah said to the king, "Aon, son of Nimrod, came to me last night, saying, 'Give to me the great and beautiful horse that the king gave you, and I will give you silver and gold and straw and provender for its value.' And I said to him, 'Wait till I see the king concerning your words, and behold, whatever the king says, that will I do.' And now, my lord and king, behold, I have made this thing known to you, and the advice which my king will give to his servant, that will I follow." The king heard the words of Terah, and his anger was set ablaze, and he considered him in the light of a fool. And the king answered Terah and said to him, "Are you so silly, ignorant, or deficient in understanding to do this thing, to give your beautiful horse for silver and gold, or even for straw and provender? Are you so short of silver and gold that you should do this thing, because you cannot obtain straw and provender to feed your horse? And what is silver and gold to you, or straw and provender, that you should give away that fine horse which I gave you, like which there is none to be had on the whole earth?" The king left off speaking, and Terah answered the king, saying, "Like to this has the king spoken to his servant. I beseech you, my lord and king, what is this which you did say to me? Give your son, that we may kill him, and I will give you silver and gold for his value. What shall I do with silver and gold after the death of my son? Who shall inherit me? Certainly then at my death the silver and gold will return to my king who gave it. And when the king heard the words of Terah and the parable which he brought concerning the king, it grieved him greatly, and he was troubled at this thing, and his anger burned within him. And Terah saw the anger of the king was set ablaze against him. And he answered the king, saying, All that I have is in the king's power. Whatever the king desires to do to his servant, then let him do. Yea, even my son, he is in the king's power. Without value in exchange, he and his 2 brothers that are older than he. And the king said to Terah, No, but I will purchase your younger son for a price. Terah answered the king, saying, I beseech you, my lord and king, to let your servant speak a word before you. And let the king hear the word of his servant. And Terah said, Let my king give me 3 days till I consider this matter within myself, and consult with my family concerning the words of my king. And he pressed the king greatly to agree to this. The king listened to Terah, and he did so, and gave him 3 days' time. Terah went out from the king's presence, and he came home to his family, and spoke to them all the words of the king, and the people were greatly afraid. And it was in the 3rd day that the king sent to Terah, saying, Send me your son for a price, as I spoke to you, and should you not do this, I will send and kill all you have in your house, so that you shall not even have a dog remaining. And Terah hurried, as the thing was urgent from the king. And he took a child from one of his servants, which his handmaid had borne to him that day. And Terah brought the child to the king, and received value for him. And the Lord was with Terah in this matter, that Nimrod not cause Abraham's death. The king took the child from Terah, and with all his might dashed his head to the ground, for he thought it had been Abraham. This was concealed from him from that day, and it was forgotten by the king, as it was the will of providence not to suffer Abraham's death. And Terah took Abraham his son secretly, together with his mother and his nurse, and he concealed them in a cave, and he brought them their provisions monthly. The Lord was with Abraham in the cave, and he grew up, and Abram was in the cave 10 years, and the king and his princes, soothsayers, and sages thought the king had killed Abraham. Chapter 9. And Haran, the son of Terah, Abraham's oldest brother, took a wife in those days. Haran was 39 years old when he took her, and the wife of Haran conceived and gave birth to a son, and he called his name Lot. She conceived again and gave birth to a daughter, and called her name Milcah. And she again conceived and gave birth to a daughter, and called her name Sarai. Haran was 42 years old when he had Sarai, which was in the 10th year of the life of Abram. And in those days Abram and his mother and nurse went out from the cave, as the king and his subjects had forgotten the affair of Abram. When Abram came out of the cave, he went to Noah and his son Shem, and he remained with them to learn the instruction of the Lord and his ways. No man knew where Abram was, and Abram served Noah and Shem his son for a long time. Abram was in Noah's house 39 years, and Abram knew the Lord from 3 years old. He went in the ways of the Lord until the day of his death, as Noah and his son Shem had taught him. And all the sons of the earth in those days greatly went contrary to the Lord, and they rebelled against him, and they served other gods. They forgot the Lord who had created them in the earth, and the inhabitants of the earth made to themselves at that time every man his god, gods of wood and stone, which could neither speak, hear, nor deliver. And the sons of man served them, and they became their gods. The king and all his servants and Terah with all his household were the first of those that served gods of wood and stone. Terah had 12 gods of large size, made of wood and stone. After the 12 months of the year he served each one monthly. And every month Terah would bring his meat offering and drink offering to his gods. Thus did Terah all the days. All the generation were wicked in the sight of the Lord, and they thus made every man his god, but they turned away from the Lord who had created them. And there was not a man found in those days in the whole earth who knew the Lord, for they served each man his own god, except Noah and his household, and all those who were under his counsel knew the Lord in those days. Abram, the son of Terah, was becoming great in those days in the house of Noah, and no man knew it, and the Lord was with him. The Lord gave Abram an understanding heart, and he knew all the works of that generation were in vain, and that all their gods were vain. and were of no avail. And Abraham saw the sun shining on the earth, and Abraham said to himself, Certainly now the sun that shines on the earth is God, and him will I serve. And Abraham served the sun in that day, and he prayed to him. And when evening came, the sun set as usual, and Abraham said within himself, Certainly this cannot be God. And Abraham still continued to speak within himself, Who is he who made the earth, the heavens and the earth? Who created on earth? Where is he? And night darkened over him. He lifted his eyes toward the west, north, south, and east, and he saw that the sun had vanished from the earth, and the day became dark. And Abraham saw the stars and moon before him, and he said, Certainly this is the God who created the whole earth as well as man, and behold, these his servants are gods around him. And Abraham served the moon, and prayed to it all that night. And in the morning, when it was light and the sun shone on the earth as usual, Abraham saw all the things that the Lord God had made on earth. And Abraham said to himself, Certainly these are not gods that made the earth and all mankind, but these are the servants of God. And Abraham remained in the house of Noah, and there knew the Lord and his ways. He served the Lord all the days of his life, and all that generation forgot the Lord and served other gods of wood and stone, and rebelled all their days. And King Nimrod reigned securely, and all the earth was under his control. And all the earth was of one tongue and words of union. And all the princes of Nimrod and his great men took counsel together, Phut, Mitzrayim, Cush, and Canaan, with their families, and they said to each other, Come, let us build ourselves a city, and in it a strong tower, and its top reaching heaven. And we will make ourselves famed, so that we may reign on the whole world, in order that the evil of our enemies may cease from us, that we may reign mightily over them, that we may not become scattered over the earth on account of their wars. They all went before the king, and they told the king these words. And the king agreed with them in this affair, and he did so. All the families assembled, consisting of about 600,000 men, and they went to seek an extensive piece of ground to build the city and the tower. And they sought in the whole earth, and they found none like one valley at the east of the land of Shinar, about 2 days' walk, and they journeyed there, and they lived there. And they began to make bricks and burn fires to build the city and the tower that they imagined to complete. And the building of the tower was to them a transgression and a sin, and they began to build it while they were building against the Lord God of heaven. They imagined in their hearts to war against him and to ascend into heaven. And all these people and all the families divided themselves in 3 parts. The first said, We will ascend into heaven and fight against him. The second said, We will ascend to heaven and place our own gods there and serve them. And the third part said, We will ascend to heaven and strike him with bows and spears. And God knew all their works and all their evil thoughts, and he saw the city and the tower which they were building. They built themselves a great city and a very high and strong tower on account of its height. The mortar and bricks did not reach the builders in their ascent to it until those who went up had completed a full year. And after that they reached the builders and gave them the mortar and the bricks. Thus it was done daily. And behold, these ascended and others descended the whole day. And if a brick should fall from their hands and get broken, they would all weep over it. If a man fell and died, none of them would look at him. The Lord knew their thoughts, and it came to pass when they were building, they cast the arrows toward the heavens, and all the arrows fell on them, filled with blood. When they saw them, they said to each other, Certainly we have slain all those that are in heaven. For this was from the Lord, in order to cause them to err, in order to destroy them from off the face of the ground. They built the tower and the city, and they did this thing daily until many days and years were elapsed. And God said to the 70 angels who stood foremost before him, to those who were near to him, saying, Come, let us descend and confuse their tongues, that one man shall not understand the language of his neighbor. And they did so to them. From that day following, they forgot each man his neighbor's tongue, and they could not understand to speak in one tongue. When the builder took from the hands of his neighbor lime or stone which he did not order, the builder would cast it away and throw it on his neighbor, that he would die. And they did so many days, and they killed many of them in this manner. The Lord struck the 3 divisions that were there, and he punished them according to their works and designs. Those who said, We will ascend to heaven and serve our gods, became like apes and elephants. Those who said, "We will strike the heaven with arrows," the Lord killed them, one man through the hand of his neighbor. And the third division of those who said, "We will ascend to heaven and fight against him," the Lord scattered them throughout the earth. Those who were left among them, when they knew and understood the evil which was coming on them, turned away from the building, and they also became scattered on the face of the whole earth. And they ceased building the city and the tower. Therefore he called that place Babel, for there the Lord confounded the language of the whole earth. Behold, it was at the east of the land of Shinar. As to the tower which the sons of men built, the earth opened its mouth and swallowed up 1/3 part thereof, and a fire also descended from heaven and burned another third, and the other third is left to this day. It is of that part which was aloft, and its circumference is 3 days' walk. Many of the sons of men died in that tower, a people without number.